First, I just want to thank the hosts for today for bringing us together. So who do we got? We got Prab. Who else we got here?
We got Nihal.
Nihal.
Jay.
Mark. Brown. Randy. Dan. So these are some of them are great and old friends. I just want to recognize and give them a round of applause. Man. Mark Michelle. Yeah. Many of them bought into this campaign before there was much to buy into. Because I've been running for a little while now. But I stand before you right now. I was 4th in a recent national poll. Thanks to incredible people like you, we raised $10 million last quarter. And the thing you can be even happier about is we did not spend that $10 million. Because I'm an operator. I'm like, ooh, gold coins, let's save that. Let's save that so we can maximize it when the voting starts. So we are growing by leaps and bounds by any measure. How many of you watched the debate Tuesday night? Yeah, so that was a good time. I was on that stage being like, ooh, like I'm really enjoying this. They're like asking some good questions tonight. Yeah. And a shout out to Anderson Cooper and Aaron Burnett in particular, because the CNN moderators actually dug in and understand the issues of this campaign. Hey, Sharon. Where Anderson and I had exchanges off camera before where he was like, yeah, 4th Industrial Revolution, it's like a major problem. And Erin came from a business journalism background, so she understood the issues. And that's one reason why Tuesday night went so well for me in the campaign. We saw incredible results afterwards. We raised about $500,000 in the 24 hours immediately after the debate. And then I just came off this 10-hour AMA yesterday.
Amazing!
So someone was like, hey, is your wife watching? I was like, you think my wife's gonna watch 10 hours of me? Anyone who's married knows how laughable that is. And we have some really fun, exciting announcements coming up. If you are about my age, which many of you seem to be, you'd probably be excited that Rivers Cuomo of Weezer is playing a concert for us in Iowa, November 1. Yeah, the Yang Gang has so many fun, interesting people that are coming out of the woodwork. We have a chance to go down this whole new lane, which is this pop culture lane. And if you've been part of the campaign, you know that it's not like we got knighted by cable TV. The way we got here was through Sam Harris, Joe Rogan, Breakfast Club, Freakonomics, like all these podcasters that had independent voices. And so we have to, in my mind, build on what's worked, what's got us here. Because if we wait for cable news to turn our way, we'll probably be waiting for a long time. No, that's not the path. But we do have a chance to become a cultural movement in a way that many of the other political campaigns do not. Now, you all are very cool, so you've probably been involved with politics before, because many of you are quite affluent. You know, shaking your head no. All right, let's try this. How many of you, this is like the first political campaign you've actually been involved with? That's pretty good. Especially in this neck of the woods. Because most of you live here in Manhattan, and so if you're like me, you get invited to the political things periodically because your friends think like, yeah, you can afford it. The rest of it. So if you ever hand up, you've done a really good job avoiding that stuff. That's a deliberate choice. That doesn't happen by accident. But this campaign is exciting folks who have not been excited about politics traditionally, which is a lot of Americans. At this point, independents outnumber Democrats and Republicans in this country by almost 2 to 1. Something like 48% say they're independent. And then 25% have been disengaged with politics and say this is not relevant to me. But our campaign is piercing that. And when we have these rallies, these 5,000 person rallies, I ask the same question, how many of you, this is like the first political thing you've ever done? And it's like half the crowd or more. The trick is going to be converting that energy into votes come February. But if we can pull that off, then we can win this whole thing.
Yeah.
Like, because in many ways we are speaking a different language than the other candidates, and it's manifest in the sort of support we're getting. Where I am one of only 2 Democratic candidates in the field that 10% or more of Donald Trump voters say they would support in the general election. Which means, if I'm the nominee, we win the whole thing in 2020. That's just math. And the #1 criteria for Democratic primary voters is what? Who can beat Donald Trump?
Andrew.
So you see the way it works. Now, most Democratic primary voters have not figured out that Andrew Yang is the surest bet to beat Donald Trump. They haven't figured that out yet. But thanks to you and your contributions and the energy and the money, we're going to be able to make that case to them in the days ahead, and they'll figure it out. It's one reason why Joe Biden is still the leader in most polls, because people think he's the surest bet to beat Donald Trump. And you're laughing. I've now been around the candidates, a dozen times. It's not just the debates. We're at the same cattle calls in South Carolina and Iowa and New Hampshire. And I believe that voters are going to come to the realization that Joe Biden is not the surest bet to beat Donald Trump. And everywhere we go, people tell me, it's like, wow, no, I hadn't heard of you before, but now I've got my eye on you. It's like you can see the needle moving in very positive ways on the ground. And as we let people know that I'm now appealing to hundreds of thousands of disaffected Trump voters, and also independents and libertarians, as well as Democrats and progressives, we can build a much broader coalition to beat Donald Trump in 2020 than the other candidates. Because we're speaking a totally different language. A language known as English. A language known as English that's interspersed with things called numbers. Now, and the funny thing is, it's not anything we planned. It's just well, this is the way I think and communicate. This is the way I did it. People are like, oh, I've never heard anything like this before. Well, it's really been quite fascinating. Where so many people in the early states have said, you don't sound like any politician I've ever heard. And they are not upset about it. They're not like, get me a politician. They're like, wow, this is really different. I like this. I like this form of different. And so because of that different conversation and a different set of solutions that seem relevant to people, we're having a different kind of voice, a different sort of appeal. It's one reason why the cable news networks don't know what to do with us yet. But as we keep on growing, we're putting them in a tougher spot. Yep. It's very, very hard to ignore $10 million. And it's going to be very, very hard to ignore when I start winning states in February. So I sense that many of you think the same way I do, so we'll walk through some of the mechanics because it's fun. So if you look at the early states, New Hampshire, where I'm going on Tuesday, it's an open primary. Anyone can participate in the Democratic primary in February. So if you're a Republican in New Hampshire, which is more interesting to you? Helping Donald Trump stop on William Meld, or participate in the much more interesting Democratic primary? A lot of people are going to be like, oh, I'm going to cross the aisle. What's the third party in New Hampshire? Libertarians. Live Free or Die, remember that? Yep. The Freedom Dividend's named after them. A lot of libertarians who are like, I like this Yang fellow. Who gets polled when people call? It's registered Democrats. And even then, the polls in New Hampshire have had me at 5, 6, 7% in New Hampshire, even now. I go up there and the energy's electric, the crowds, we draw hundreds of people. And then come February, people are going to be blown away by all of these folks showing up to these primaries being like, hey, I'm here to vote for Yang, as they're going to come in as independents and Republicans and Libertarians, but it's like an open primary. So we can make magic happen in New Hampshire next February. Whatever the polls say, and the polls are going up and up for us, they understate our strength significantly. Also, most polls use something called landlines. So I want you to visualize the person who has a landline and then picks up that landline and then has that conversation with a pollster. It's probably not a high overlap with this group or a lot of the folks who support this campaign. So there are very structural reasons why our support's much, much higher than is coming up in the official numbers, even though the official numbers look better and better for us all the time. So this is just giving you some inside baseball, because I think many of you think the same way I do, which is like, okay, like what are the key variables? How are we going to win this thing? But we have a real chance to win. We have a real chance to win.
Yes.
I will say I'll share something that Joe Biden said to me at the debate. He said to me, we had this moment, because he's talking about the fourth industrial revolution. And so he said, Andrew, you have a good chance of winning this thing as I do. But if I do win, you're going to be one of the first calls I make, because we have to try and address the fourth industrial revolution.
Woo! Good man. Good man.
And then what I thought when I heard this, I said, holy shit, Joe Biden is Yang Gang! But these are the kinds of exchanges that are going on like during the commercial breaks. We could never get there without people like you. You're all visionaries, early adopters to the campaign. You see what we can get done, and I can't thank you enough for it. Who's up to make history together in 2020? We're going to do it. It's going to be a celebration of humanity on a scale the world has never seen, and it wouldn't be possible without you. Thank you all very, very much. Make America think harder.
Yes!
So I'm now going to try and take this opportunity to take some questions. Very smart group, I can tell. Yes, go ahead.
So I'm asking on proxy of another human that could not be here, if that's okay.
Sure.
All right, so she is a at-will worker. She is actually a professor at a couple of different colleges teaching English. And this was her question. Since most workers are now being hired as at-will and on contracts, what is your plan for affordable childcare? Because $12K a year does not close a filling gap. And as you know, more women are more likely to spend their $1,000 a month towards childcare statistically than men are to use theirs for childcare. And then she asked, as contract workers, I spent years teaching as multiple colleges, universities to make a living wage, but I did not have access to a pension fund, except Social Security and healthcare. Can he consider a tax on companies that hire a majority of their workers at will or contract to allow them the ability to then have access to those benefits? Yeah, sorry.
So these are such core issues because they are so much the norm now. And it speaks to me in part because many of us here in this room have friends who are academics. And if you're an academic, in the old days you might have gotten a full professorship in a tenure track position, but today that essentially never happens. Like you wind up in this permanent adjunct subsistence role where they just contract you every single year, and that's the new model of academia. It's immoral, it's bankrupt, and we just keep producing more and more aspiring academics and then plugging them into the system, and the growth model is broken. So 94% of the new jobs created in America today are temp gig or contractor jobs. It's the new normal. It's actually unusual if you have like full-time employment and benefits, certainly a pension. I mean, oh my gosh, like, yeah, they did away with that.
You're like the only one.
Quite some time ago. So what we had to do is own up to the new reality and then start putting measures in place that recognize that reality. So to that set of issues, we should have universal child care in this country, bar none. In large part because 40% of American children today are born to single moms. Wow. And single parent equals single mom in like 86% of the case. So when you think single parent, like, you know, most of the time it's a single mom. And as a parent myself, this is something that when I found that 40% of American children are born to single parents, I had to triple check that stat. I was like, that stat doesn't seem right. And then you check and then check. So this is the new normal in America. So we need to try and create social structures that essentially have that as the family unit in mind. Which means if the mom's gonna work, which she should, there needs to be childcare that doesn't suck up the majority of her salary. So that's something that we should provide immediately. The data is clear that time spent with a child early on is very, very formative. So we should have paid maternity leave in this country, like immediately. Here's the list of countries that don't have paid maternity leave for new moms. United States of America, Lesotho, Swaziland, Papua New Guinea, Liberia. That is the entire list.
What?
Yeah, I say we get the fuck off that list. What do you all think?
Yeah!
So put that in place. And then what your friend's suggesting about retirement, half Americans will never retire, will never have meaningful retirement savings. So the freedom dividend stacks on top of existing Social Security benefits. We need to create a public health care plan and option that essentially accepts, look, getting healthcare through your employer makes less and less sense in an era where everyone's doing temp gig and contract jobs, and essentially rebuild a social safety net that's independent of your employer.
The wall.
Yes, go ahead. Just go ahead and use the mic.
Oh, hi, quick question. I have donated the use of my building to the Yang Gang in Phoenix, and I would love to know what would it take. Actually, they want me to ask, what would it take for you to come to Phoenix? I will try to organize a dinner like this.
Wait, I need him to come to Long Island first
pointed question.
before you get to Phoenix.
Well, thanks
Route
for doing that.
66.
I have to talk to the team. Like, I'm barely the master of my own schedule. It's a little bit like my marriage, my family. I'm just like, hey baby, what am I doing? He's like, you're going there. I'm like, great. So if you talk to the team, and I personally love Phoenix, would love to be there. I love Long Island, would love to be there too. Thank you for the support. I appreciate it a great deal.
We're going winters, February.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, that's probably better.
Hi, thank you so much. I have a question, two things. If you're looking for an interesting model for healthcare and also for the revenue minimum for insertion for the freedom bond or whatever it is, France, I lived there half my life. I would like to know if you have anything to say about the upcoming Prime Minister elections in Canada on Monday, and if you've been in contact with anybody, and if you have any opinion on that. Thank you.
I haven't been in contact with anyone, and I don't have any profound thoughts on the Prime Minister election in Canada, except just as a general principle, I think that it's not a bad thing if we're a little bit forgiving and understanding of different people's missteps.
Justin.
Alright, this question's for my mom because she likes you, but she has a certain question. She said that her taxes keep going up every year, like she gets taxed more and more. Like this year she got taxed $10K compared to last year was $0. And she takes care of me, my sister, my two aunts, my cousin. And her income isn't, like she makes decent amount of money, but she just keeps getting taxed more and more every year. Would you like fix taxing budget for like single moms that take care of their children, like for a while, and other family members?
Yeah, what kind of work does your mom do?
She's a business banker, relationship manager.
That's cool.
So I've been telling this joke on the trail, like, this is an old joke, it's like, why did I rob the bank? Because that's where the money is. The money's not with your mom. Just in the sense that it's like, if we're going to try and address the imbalances in our society, the place you start is like the $1 trillion tech company that's paying zero in taxes, or the big winners from artificial intelligence that are probably going to be in position to like hoard most of those gains themselves. Like, those are the fundamental imbalances that we should be trying to address. And if your mom's a single mom making ends meet, like that is not the place we should be looking for new tax revenue. If anything, we need to try and strengthen her ability to make the family strong.
Sure. I want to talk over just being able to pass the mic. I'll pull someone from the back.
So I have a question about the support that you were getting, if any at all, from the finance industry and also like CEOs of Fortune 500 companies. And how do we, I'm sorry, what is the support for you like with the finance industry as well as Fortune 500 CEOs? Because it's important.
Yeah.
It's
I've spent time with Jamie Dimon, who came out for negative income tax, which is actually like the cousin to the freedom dividend. I don't know how many of you saw that. Jamie Dimon came out and said that we should declare a national emergency around the American economy that's not working for people, and we should have a negative income tax and a Marshall Plan to rebuild the economy. So there are CEOs, he also is part of the Business Roundtable that said we need to broaden the definition of business success to go beyond shareholder value. So there are CEOs that are very much aligned. Jamie actually had me come in and speak to his teams at JP Morgan about the fourth industrial revolution and like the transforming economy. So the CEOs see the set of problems. I have been endorsed by, and this is maybe a different set of people than you're thinking of, but Elon Musk and Sam Altman and Jack Dorsey and Alexis Ohanian, like a bunch of the very senior prominent techies have gotten behind me in the campaign. And there are many aligned CEOs, because when I spoke to 70 CEOs here in New York City, I asked how many of you are looking at having AI and software replace back office clerical workers? Guess how many hands went up out of 70? All 70. And so they understand the problem very acutely. And what I said to those CEOs is, look, you have the incentives you have. You actually could lose your job if you did not replace those workers with that AI and software. You know you're optimizing for bottom line and shareholder value, so we have to try and free you up to optimize for different things, or else you're going to make very, very consistent decisions, and we can't blame you for that. Like, that's just the set of incentives that we've set up. I'll choose someone in the back, the tall man.
Yes.
Hi, we know that UBI and VAT tax is a progressive scheme. Have you crunched the numbers on how progressive? And if you have, tell everybody about it, because I think we'd like to share that information with people.
Thank you for the setup. So the plan would increase the buying power for approximately 94% of Americans. So it's very, very progressive. And again, you have to go where the money is. We know that we're in the most extreme economy in history, and so the top 6% are really, really prosperous right now. And many of the people who are in that bracket are here in this room are like supporting my campaign, because we realize we need to rebalance things. But it's a very, very progressive plan. It increases the buying power for 90% plus of Americans. I'm gonna keep roaming around. No, I won't. Here you go.
Hi, so as you know, I'm from Long Island, and I need a selfie with you later for one of your fantastic volunteers, Allison. But,
Sure.
People don't know what a VAT tax is. They hear tax, and that's it. They stop listening. I do know what a VAT tax is. I lived in Germany for a time. I have relatives over there. So I think that's something that really has to be explained to people, that they just don't listen once I throw that out. The other question I did get at an event that we did was, where does he stand on the whole Taiwan issue? That's a big one. They want you to answer that. And the whole Hispanic, La Casa Blanca, I was in Hempstead, Hispanic community, and I do my best with my broken Spanish, but I think that's another area that needs to be explored.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
I'll start at the back. I'm going on Jorge Ramos sometime soon. Apparently he's like the singular journalistic voice for Latinos here in the country. Everyone knows my family's from Taiwan. I visit Taiwan on the regular. It was very touching. My dad went to a debate watch party in Taiwan and just showed up and was like, I'm his dad.
Wow.
So my feelings on Taiwan are exactly what you'd expect them to be. As for value-added tax, you lived in Germany. This is nothing new. Literally, over 100 developed economies have a value-added tax, and anyone who's looked at it says, "Hey, this is actually efficient." It's one reason why 100 other countries, including most every developed economy, already have it. You're right that many Americans are not familiar with it, and we do have some explaining to do on that front. It's true. Yes, sir.
So I have questions around child support law reforms. So there are various federal child support laws, such as the Bradley Amendment, which is quite old now, and it dates back to the 1980s anti-welfare days, and it prohibits courts from retroactively changing child support, and it leads to some extremely strict outcomes. So there was a man called Bobby Sherrill who came back from Iraq after being held as a hostage of Al-Qaeda, and he went straight to prison because he forgot to send his child support checks from his Al-Qaeda detention. And then these laws were made further worse in the 1990s with the so-called welfare reforms that encouraged states to confiscate child support money going to parents instead of letting them keep that. So the multiple parts to this. Firstly, can you confirm, I'm pretty sure this is the case, but can you confirm that you will not confiscate any child support money going to a custodial parent to pay for the freedom dividend? Secondly, so that would be an easy one. Secondly, will you, so Colorado recently stopped confiscating child support money for welfare recipients. Will you repeal other laws that encourage states to confiscate child support money from custodial parents like single mothers? And thirdly, will you repeal the Bradley Amendment and encourage states to have child support that varies with income like in other countries? Because right now you can only get child support reduced by a quarter, which is very important.
Wow. I have to say, this is such like a new set of issues for me. So certainly, you know, the first seemed very easy. Of course, you don't need to confiscate child support payments for the freedom dividend. I'll jump to the third, lining it up with income. As in other countries, I'll have to dig into it because I haven't taken a long look at these issues. But on the face of it, you know, if there are best practices in other countries that we can emulate that are not court-ordered but are instead more formulaic, like it's something I'd be open to examining for sure. I will say this has not been like an issue that I've been focused on at all. Man, it's such an interesting issue, man. It's like I love getting questions I haven't heard before, which, you know, that was one. Go in the other direction. The man with my t-shirt on, I gotta say. So this is my high school yearbook photo. My wife wears it around the house now, and it's like my favorite piece of Yang Gang swag is that thing. It reminds me, I was like, I remember those days, listening to the Smiths and the Cure, walking around, being all angsty.
Yeah, I just walked over from 14th Street and 8th Avenue, and then 3 people stopped me and said, like, "Hey, Yang Gang, all right." So, where the year? I walked the block and had a conversation about you and your policies, and hopefully I flipped at least one person.
Nice work.
My big issue is the DNC, CNN, MSNBC, and Krugman. What's your plan to combat the institutional opposition to the perceived leaders of the Democratic candidates? The Bidens and the right?
Yeah, no,
it's a huge issue. I mean, I think if people like understand what you're selling and your positions are, it's incredibly
Thorough and thoughtful.
It's great. It's something that people really are welcome to, but it's the messaging. You know, like how do you get questions at the debates? You know, how do you get through CNN, the DNC, MSNBC? Like Tulsi threw it out there yesterday. You know, what's your plan?
I have gotten such an education during this last number of months. And each of the institutions and organizations you named is like its own thing. So it's like a different approach to each. I thought I got a very fair shake at this last debate, in large part because Anderson Cooper and Aaron Burnett understand the issues very deeply. And CNN, I think, is fairly impartial. So CNN's its own thing. CNN screwed up with our campaign once, and they like sincerely apologized and like changed it. Like I think CNN's relatively fair. The DNC. Their process so far has been fair, in my mind. They set up the polling. If you hit it, you hit it. Now, are there things down the road that you could like legitimately be concerned about? Like, of course. But to date, you know, I don't really have any significant complaints about the DNC. Krugman is his own thing. Like, I got like a mini like Twitter fight with him, and then like I think he like just like resented it or something, and the rest of it. Though the New York Times. There have been some things they've done that like I've been very excited about, like having me on the Daily and like doing a few other things that I think have been very positive. MSNBC, like that one was just like a muddle. I'm just like, I'm so confused. They just released a graphic today with like the top 6 cash on hand, of which I'm number like 5 or 6. And they replaced me with Cory Booker, who was like, several million less than I had on hand, and like, I raised 50% more than like last quarter. And so that's like objectively very poor journalism. So I was like, hey, I think I'm supposed to be on this graphic. So MSNBC, I do not know what is going on with them. But for better or for worse, MSNBC is moderating the next debate. So, yeah, so when you talk about these institutions, like they each have their own people and agendas and personalities. There are some I'm more concerned about than others. The way we win is, frankly, we don't rely upon the institutions as ways to reach the American people, because we've seen that we can reach the American people in really fun, innovative ways. I did this 10-hour AMA yesterday, and how many people did we reach officially on campaign people? I think we reached like, someone said like it was like 12 million people like been exposed to it.
Yes.
Do a podcast.
So like do our own podcast,
Yes,
like plugging
yes.
into different voices, and we have some people with very, very, very expansive reaches that are going to come out for the Yang Gang. That the American public, frankly, I think respects and admires more than. So that and that's the fun about this campaign. It's like humanity first. It's like, how do we beat the corporate media or whatnot? Is like get humans that people listen to, like on board. And this came out of nowhere. This is like a small thing and not precisely what I'm talking about. But like Anita Baker just came out as part of the coolest thing in the world. Yeah, hashtag sweet love. I was like, sweet love. So, like things like that are happening all the time. Like that was out of nowhere. I mean, I was freaking pumped about it. But some of the things that we know are coming down the line are like gonna be like that ramped up, or like real needle movers being like, hey, I'm for Yang, and then people will be like, what? And if you look at like the degree of like trust, excitement, enthusiasm, like there are figures that transcend politics and transcend our cable news networks. So we got to get to them. So if you know any of them, you know what I'm talking about. Let's go get them. This is really humanity versus the machine. We are the humans, they are the machine, and we're gonna win. Yeah, so let's get some humans. That's gonna be fun. Yeah, I'll go toward the, yes, miss.
I'll give you a per my question.
Oh, sure, I'm gonna pass the mic to you.
Thank you. As a high school student, I'm curious about your stance on gun control and general safety in schools.
How old are you?
I'm 16.
I'm a parent myself. One of my children is in public school now, and to me it's unconscionable that we've let it get to this point where kids are going to school and literally practicing active shooter drills. So we need to try and attack gun violence at every step. Certainly the most direct step is make guns harder to buy. So I'm for universal background checks and red flag laws and assault weapons ban, and like the laws that I think there's really like popular enthusiasm and consensus around. I actually am not for active shooter drills. I think that they undermine like our kids' sense of well-being, like deprive them of a sense of control and agency, and it has not been demonstrated to me in any real way that they're like saving lives. It has been demonstrated to me that they're like freaking out our kids and making all our parents, like,
Increasing anxiety.
Increasing anxiety, like depression, like all this stuff. So it's like, so if you look at that and say, it's like, we should probably not have these drills. So if you look at the chain of that leads to gun violence, like get the guns, try and reduce supply in any way possible. But then like you try and also attack some of the root causes. And as the parent of an autistic boy, like I know that, well, we also have to know that over 96% of the shooters we're talking about are boys or men. And so this is not like an everyone problem, this is frankly like a boy problem. And then when you have boys in schools, particularly if they're neurologically atypical, most of our schools do not have the resources or expertise to like deal with that, and they don't have the numbers, like you're in a classroom where the student-teacher ratio is like 25 or 30 to 1. And so if you have the wrong boy in the wrong school, bad things happen, and 99% of the time it's happening just internally, like to the kid. But then in some cases that ends up becoming an external problem or threat or danger, like acting out. So you have to try and go to the families and the schools, rebuild a mental health infrastructure, destigmatize mental health issues. Because right now, if someone is struggling, they just want to sweep it under the rug. 99 times out of 100, there are danger signs that occur before the episode of gun violence, but like right now, that family is isolated and not able to get meaningful supports. And most of the time, after the fact, people are like, oh yeah, like we kind of knew that kid was, you know what I mean? It's like that. So we need to destigmatize assistance for that family and say, look, like we get it, we struggle, and it's a tough balance because you don't want to all of a sudden like be singling out folks, like in this case young boys in many cases, but you do need to acknowledge that we need to support families in a much more robust way and not leave people to struggle individually. All right, no, wait, this is a popular consensus. So, which do we prefer, questions or selfies? Selfies! All right. So we're gonna do one more question, and then go to selfies. Just want to follow up there too. I would lower the voting age to 16 so you can vote. Because that would turn every high school into a hotbed of political activity. Hell yeah. Right now our electorate skews older. The earlier your first vote, the more likely you are to vote for life. And the counter argument is that 16-year-olds don't understand what's happening, and I'm like, well, they can pay taxes. Yep. They're gonna be here for longer, and it's not like we give voters a pop quiz when they show up to be like, hey, you're like, you know what's going on? There are a lot of Americans who don't know what's going on that are voting. You know what I mean? So we should give 16-year-olds a chance to vote. What do you guys think?
Yeah! They're smarter.
Let me make some real change. All right, so I said one question, and then
one more. Last one.
Miss.
Here you go.
So you mentioned that you robbed the bank because that's where the money is. There are some voters who feel that the value-added tax passed the cost of the freedom dividend to the people as opposed to scooping from the pockets of these big companies that don't pay taxes at all. How would you convince them otherwise?
Good question. When you're done.
Yeah, what I would suggest to them is that, like, if you have a $1 trillion tech company like Amazon that is not paying taxes, and then you have someone like Jeff Bezos who's making like who's worth like $120 billion post-divorce, the question, like, so that's like the bank, if you will. Like, we got to go where the money is. And so, what I would say to the individual concerned that I'm somehow like that we're somehow going to get like the $1,000 a month to give to you from like your own pockets. Like, I think most Americans recognize instinctively that that would not work, and that's certainly not the intention. That we're going to try and get the winnings from the winners of the 21st century economy, because that's where the imbalance is. That's where, like, if you have a $1 trillion company, you can imagine an effective tax on them that generates hundreds of billions of dollars that gets redistributed to the people of this country. And so the goal of the VAT is to try and extract that set of monies. The other thing is that if you wanted to, you could exempt consumer staples from the VAT. You could say, hey, diapers, no VAT. I just heard from someone downstairs, like, feminine hygiene products, no VAT. And then you could say, hey, yachts, we're gonna ratchet the VAT up a little bit. Like the VAT does not necessarily need to be like a blanket end-all be-all. Like, we can tailor it to help increase buying power for families the way it should be.
That was awesome.
Thank you. Oh, was someone gonna say some words? Ni hao! Yes, brother, here you go. Let's give it up for Ni hao.
Andrew, thank you. Give it up for the Yang Gang. What's up? Where we went tonight that we crushed. We destroyed it. If anybody, by the way, feels the need that they'd like to donate some more, they can do that outside. That's very well appreciated. I want to give a shout out to our host of the evening. Of course, we're at the beautiful The Well. You guys can go downstairs around the corner and check it out afterwards. They'd love to see you. Mark Michelle, Dan Porter, Randy Brandoff, Iggy Chang.
Yeah, Iggy!
Yeah, Iggy. Woo! Singh. Nahal, that's me. Jang Yu and Prem Kumta, thank you for hosting this event. This is incredible. We never imagined that we would get this type of momentum. Andrew, we're so proud of you, man. We knew each other for years. I remember when you were in our apartment over midterm saying, Nahal, I'm thinking of running for president. I was like, president of the YMCA?
Yeah.
You're like the United States of America. I was like, That's what's up. In America, and we're going all the way. This is, I told my wife, this is the last intimate reception with Andrew Yang before the Oval Office.
Yes, all the
We're
way.
going there, baby. We're going there. Thank you, Andrew.
Yes.
Woo!
Let's have a reunion at Inauguration Day, am I right?
Yes, yes, yes. Woo!
All right, selfies. It's going to happen. And we're going to be very efficient. Very efficient. Very efficient. When I